So we all know how a dog is considered a man or woman's best friend, right?
Yes, correct.
And it's probably important to know what types of diseases are actually causing the deaths of our best friends, correct?
Yes, that's agreed.
So today we'll be talking about heartworm disease, one of the most fatal diseases in dogs that are commonly found in the United States. Do we have any questions before we begin?
No, we don't.
Awesome. So we'll go into a little bit of overview about what the disease actually is. So the heartworm disease is very common and often very fatal. Roughly about 250,000 dogs are diagnosed with heartworm per year. And the heartworm itself, why it's so important to know about this disease is because it lasts roughly 5 to 7 years within that dog's heart. Also, you can see here that it's transmitted through a mosquito, taking the blood meal from a dog and dispersing its microfilaria within that dog's cardiovascular system and causing inflammation in the heart eventually. You can also test for this disease through an antigen detection test known as SNAP, where you use the blood from the dog, or you can also use a blood smear, which will also confirm the microfilaria inside of the dog itself. So now that we know a little bit about heartworm disease, let's go into the transmission also and the life cycle of heartworm disease. So, the way the heartworm disease begins to spread is the following. It starts off with the mosquito, which contains these microfilaria, also known as heartworms. When that mosquito goes to take a blood meal from the dog, it ingests its microfilaria within the saliva and makes its way through the cardiovascular system of the dog. The microfilaria that are inserted into the dog start at a phase known as L3. This L3 phase molts and makes its way through the arteries and the vessels of the dog and molts into L4 as early as 3 days post-infection. Then after L4, it makes its way to L5, roughly 45 to 60 days post-infection. Right after that, the worm becomes known as an immature adult. And the immature adult penetrates the venous capillaries and makes its way all the way to the heart. While it's making its way through the heart, causing a lot of trials and issues within that dog itself. Once the heartworm reaches maturity at 6 months of age, it is most likely going to be found in the right atrium of the heart. It gets to the right atrium of the heart by entering through the superior vena cava, making its way to the right atrium, then to the right ventricle, causing a lot of inflammation and crowding within that right side of the heart, leading to the beginning of the issues that we see, such as hypertrophy. And what hypertrophy is a lot of tension and inflammation, causing the right side of the heart to become much bigger than the left. Once the heartworm is an adult at 6 months, it begins to reproduce and release its babies, the baby microfilaria that are known as the L1. And those L1 microfilaria make its way through the bloodstream of the infected dog, which then will be picked up by a new mosquito when that new mosquito is taking a new blood meal. And that new mosquito will then transfer it to a new dog, hence letting the cycle repeat and repeat and repeat. So that's the transmission / life cycle of heartworms. So let's go into a little bit of the symptoms and effects that can come from this disease. The most common one is difficulty of breathing. And the reason why this is the most common one, and normally the biggest message to let you know that your dog has heartworm, is due to the fact that when the heartworms are in the heart, they make their way to the pulmonary artery, which is the pathway for the blood to reach the lungs to become oxygenated, then make its way back into the heart and out to the body. If the heartworms are taking up this space, what's happening is the amount of blood entering and leaving the body is altered, and also the amount of oxygenation that it's receiving is altered as well, due to the fact that it's taking up space in that pulmonary artery, going into the lungs to become oxygenated. Another really common symptom that you see with heartworm disease is fatigue. Fatigue in your dog will come naturally due to the fact that it doesn't have that energy, because blood is not being pumped properly to, deliver the proper nutrients to each part of its body. Another symptom and side effect is coughing, also decreased appetite, and most severely death. The reason why these are all very common in dogs as far as symptoms is because they all relate to the heart. And because the heartworms, the bigger the worm burden just means the amount of heartworms that are in the right atrium, right ventricle area at that time. Because they can become so big, they cause a lot of internal issues within the dog. And once they begin to create their babies and disperse their babies, it just makes problems a lot worse within the dog itself, because those babies are able to eat up the blood vessels and eat up the arteries and veins and just mess up a lot of the tissues within that dog while they're circulating and waiting for the new mosquito to come in and digest it and bring it to the next dog. And while the mosquitoes has the L1 stage, the L1 are molting inside that mosquito in order to reach the L3 stage, where it will then be deposited into the new dog, starting at L3. So as you can see, the heartworm disease is very, very, very important to know how it works, because if we know how it works, then we know how to stop it via science and treatments and making medications and so on and so forth. So it's important to know what is potentially causing these deaths in our best friends and look forward to knowledge and ways to treat this type of disease. Thank you for listening. Do you guys have any questions for me?
Yes, I do.
Yes. What is your
Can
question?
cats get heartworms?
Yeah, so that's a really good question. Cats actually can get heartworm, but it's really actually rare that you see a cat that gets a heartworm, simply because the preferred host for heartworm is a dog, is a canine. That's why a lot of the time, it's us as humans don't receive heartworms, because the mosquito and the microfilaria that it deposits doesn't live well in our body temperature, our body type, as well as same thing with cats. So cats can get heartworm, but it's just a lot more rare. The more common diagnostic will be in a
Okay,
dog.
that's good to know.
Anyone else?
Can heartworm be treated?
Yeah, heartworms can actually be treated several ways. The most common way you see in America is through heartworm prevention, just because that way is what stabilizes the heartworm. It doesn't necessarily kill the adult heartworms that are in the heart, but what the heartworm prevention does is kills the L3 stages that are originally deposited within that dog. There also is another treatment, such as ivermectin. Ivermectin is what kills the adult heartworms that are in the heart itself. So if you use the prevention, your dog is going to be free of the L3 microfilaria inside that are circulating through its cardiovascular system, but it won't actually remove the adult heartworms that are producing the actual L1s and L3s that are in your system. So there's two ways you can treat it. The ivermectin is a lot more frowned upon, simply because it can actually cause death in your dogs due to the high dosage and high strength of that injection. So that's why we recommend, most of the time, you see that your vet will recommend you going the prevention route, because once the heartworms are in the heart, if you're preventing the L3, L2, L1 stages, most often your dog will be okay.
Thank you.
Anyone else?
How much do these cost?
Excuse me?
How much does this cost?
How much does what cost?
The prevention?
The prevention is actually pretty cheap. You can go to your local pet supply store or your local vet, and there's a ton of different heart guard preventions that you can get, such as Heart Guard, Trifecta, so on and so forth. There's so many different brands out there, and they'll all do the same thing. They roughly range about $40 to $80, right around there. But as we're talking about with the ivermectin, that dosage, that shot, that injectable, is a lot more expensive, probably ranging a couple $100s. There are payment plans that you can do for something like that, pertaining to which vet you go to, but definitely if finances are an issue, I would recommend you doing the prevention, just because it's a little bit cheaper. Anything else?
No.
That's it.
Thank you guys again for paying attention and tuning into my information speech about heartworm disease and how it is spread. Thank you for your time. I hope you guys have a good night.